Alright, so welcome back to part 2 of installing onboard air into a 2014 Polaris Ranger 570 side-by-side. In the previous episode we installed the tank. Check that out if you haven't seen it yet. In this episode we're going to be working on mounting the compressor pump, and doing as much of the fittings and hoses as I can get done today. So hopefully we'll get it all done. If not, I'll just tack it on to the end of the video. So let's get started. The first thing I wanted to demonstrate, which is very important for any pipe thread, is how to wrap the tape properly so you get a good seal. Now all these fittings are just placed in here loosely because I was kind of laying out how I wanted everything to be. The only thing I've tightened so far is this one joint right here because the tape was already on it. So from the pump, this hose here, this is called the leader hose. It's made to take the higher heat because this pump gets a little bit hot on the top, so you don't want that heat transferring to the hose and melting something. So this hose is important. If you ever do something like this, do not remove the leader hose or get a proper replacement if something's wrong with it. Off of that we have a built-in swivel and a check valve. This came on it. I tried to remove it, but it is so tight I was just damaging the fitting trying to remove it. So I didn't want it here, but I'm going to have to leave it where it is. The check valve really needs to be on the tank, which I have a second check valve right here. This is going to be directly mounted to the tank, and the reason why you want a check valve on the tank is if the hose were to be worn through, cut, or exploded or whatever, you wouldn't have the entire tank just dumping out in one giant shot. The check valve will prevent any backflow. So let's start over here. Like I said, the tape, putting on the tape is the most important part of this. This right here, this is the pressure switch. This is set between 90 and 120. I'm not sure how you're supposed to adjust it. I don't see any adjustments in there. Unless I'm missing something. Oh, I see. Okay, off at 120, back on at 90. All right, so it's got a dead zone. All right, I thought it was adjustable, but it's not. All right, so as the pump builds up, gets to 120 psi, shuts off. When it drains down back to 90, it turns back on again. Okay, so that's how this works. So take your Teflon tape. This is the heavy-duty gas line type tape. I love to use this stuff because it's nice and thick. And you always want to wrap, if you're looking at the end of the fitting, you want to wrap in a clockwise direction, and you want to try to make the tape right at the front edge, right at the leading edge of the thread. In this case the tape is a little too wide, but that doesn't matter. Just bunch it up at the other end. And I like to do at least 2 full wraps around. And the way you break this tape is you use your thumbnail, hold it tight, hold the tape tight, and just snap it off like that. And then always take the end, fold it over, and then you won't lose it when you put it back in. It'll stay there so you can find it easier the next time. So after you wrap it, now you take that little excess and you carefully smush it in so that you're not folding it over itself. And then I like to take and just rub my finger on it so it starts to smush into the threads. So hopefully you can see that pretty good. Okay, so then that, you want to feed that into the fitting nice and straight and get it started. That way the tape is inside. I don't care what squishes out when you tighten it, but you want the tape to be in the threads. Okay, just like that. Nice neat job. When you tighten that properly, it's not going to leak. Alright, so same thing with the next threads. You notice I haven't tightened it yet because I can tighten them both at the same time after I get the tape on. So we're going to get the tape right on the edge, right at that first thread. Don't care about what bunches up on the other end. I hope you can see this. I can't see the camera to tell. And we just snap it off like that. Right? Alright, so I give it a quick smush in right at the edge of the threads there. And that is going to thread into here. And this is all going to get tightened down. Now, because there's two different sizes, I'm going to tighten the big one first. And you want to go fairly tight. This T is a nice thick-walled stainless. And for some reason my neighbor is playing extremely loud music. Don't you hate that? Alright. Alright, nice and tight. Now to tighten this big one, I'm going to need a slightly larger adjustable. There we go. Alright. Annoying neighbors aside, so there's our first couple of joints there. Now the next thing is going to go to the hose. This is a barbed fitting for the hose. It's a tiny bit loose in this hose. This hose is kind of a weird ID, but I think it'll be alright once I tighten it down with the clamps. Alright, I gotta stop this. This fucking music is ridiculous. Alright, so because I mounted this brush guard on the front, I can't open the hood directly without moving the brush guard out of the way. Luckily, the way it's designed is down below here, there's two thumb screws that you take out completely. So there's one. Two, and then this just folds forward. Now the hood can be opened. You have a rubber thing on both sides. And there's a little pop thing in the middle. There. So I've already established a location for this pump. Compressor, whatever you want to call it. It's going to go right in the middle there, just like so. So I had already made these two little feet out of some steel rectangular tubing. It's 1 inch by 1/2 inch. I think it's 0.93 wall thickness. So now that the paint is ground off, put that in place, and I'm going to get the welder set up, and I'm just going to tack it on there. Then I'll unbolt it and finish welding. Now another thing I'm going to need to do, because all kinds of water and mud and dust and everything get under here, you can see it just by looking at everything. I need to extend this. This is the intake. It has a filter, but I don't want the filter to get all wet and nasty. So I got to run a hose off of that to the interior of the side-by-side so that it gets the cleanest air possible and I don't have to keep changing the filter every time. I'm not doing a full seam weld on this. I'm just doing 3 good sized tacks on each side. That should be plenty. Alright, so what I'm doing here is, because this has rubber feet designed to absorb vibration, I'm putting a nut between the rubber foot and the steel bracket I made. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I don't want to tighten the 1032 screw down and crush the rubber a lot. And that's the only way you'd be able to get it tight, is by crushing the rubber a lot. So what I'm going to do is thread these in. I should get an extension. Alright, so what I'm going to do is tighten down the 1032 Allen head cap screws just until it starts crushing a little bit. Then I'm going to use the nut to make sure that the bolt doesn't back off. It's going to be my locking mechanism. Alright, after a long time of digging around boxes for fittings, because this is the one thing I hadn't planned ahead for, I've come up with this situation here. It's not ideal. It's going to be a little restrictive, but I think it'll work for now. I can always improve it later. The main thing is I want to get this sealed off so that I'm not getting dust and dirt inside the compressor. I'm not going to go super tight, but I do want a good seal. That's pretty good. Okay. Now this type of connection here that I'm undoing is called a compression fitting. I don't know if you can see that. It's got a little ferrule that goes inside of the tube to keep it from getting crushed, and then you got the compression nut on the outside, which also has a little brass piece that it crushes down on. This is actually a little bit loose, but like I said, I can improve it later. So what you want to do is you want to hold the hose all the way into the fitting when you're snugging this down. Make sure it's fully seated in there. And don't over tighten this type of fitting. Just go until it feels nice and snug on the hose, and it's not going to pull out. Now this is not going to be under pressure, so I don't have to worry about it blowing out. It's only going to be as a vacuum. So next step is going to be to run this inside the cabin somehow. I gotta find a pathway that I like. That'll be done off camera. So here's a nice tool I thought I'd share with you guys. It's a specialty cutter made specifically for cutting stuff like this, soft plastic hose or tubing or something like that. It's got a long razor blade like edge on the top and just a flat plastic surface on the bottom. When you cut with it, it makes a very clean, precise end. Requires no post cleanup, and it goes into, you know, fittings nicely without being crooked or smushed or anything like that. You can also use it to do cutting, you know, box cutting. It's got a little extension on it, and you can cut like regular wire down here in this golden area. So very useful tool if you do a lot of tubing work. Alright, so what I've done is I run the hose. I made it a little extra long in case I want to change the configuration. But it's coming out of the compressor there. I just got it routing around. Instead of drilling yet another hole in my dash, I just kind of snuck it in on that little groove there. And that's sitting out of the way, just above my main gauge cluster there. So easy to change the filter, and it doesn't interfere with anything that I can tell. So alright, so next step here, I routed the pressure line, which is coming out of the compressor, up and around and underneath where the hood catches on the middle there. The pressure switch is hanging down here, and the way they have this compressor designed is it switches on the negative wire. Not something I'm a huge fan of, but I decided to leave it alone on this one. I like to turn off the positive wire to equipment, but evidently they decided otherwise. So I got that grounded. I just stuck it under an existing bolt right there. That holds the, I guess it's the computer on. And then I attached the next section of hose with clamp, hose clamp, and I routed that underneath. And because it's on, especially on this side of the vehicle, it's very difficult to run underneath because of the skid plates and there's so much stuff under there. I decided to take a page from my friend Craig's book, which it's not the best scenario, but it will work, and I'm going to run it up the cage and down the back, and then come out where the tank is in the back there. So I'll keep working on it. Alright, so a little bit of a final update here. I finished all the wiring, and I ordered some new fittings so I could put a larger intake hose for the air. Now the hose itself is overkill, but it's the hole on the inside of the fitting that I wanted to be the right size. So if you look at the hole size on the end of the fittings here, they're just a tiny bit bigger than the hole in the filter unit. So I know there's not going to be any restriction. That's going to require a clamp. It's a little bit of a loose fit on that. Okay, so coming off. Shouldn't need a clamp on that one. It's a nice tight fit on the barbs. Alright, so that should be it.